The night was quiet in the heart of Seoul. The city lights shimmered as if nothing unusual was happening, yet for millions of fans around the world, this date carried a deep emotional weight. It was Park Jimin's 30th birthday. Normally, such a day would be filled with laughter, decorations, and the warmth of people who love him. But this year was different. This year, Jimin spent his birthday in silence, surrounded not by friends or family, but by the still air of an empty room. There were no candles to blow, no songs sung in his honor, and no calls from his parents or childhood friends. It was as if time had forgotten to celebrate him, except for one person, Jin. The world might know Jin BTS as the group's eldest member, the man whose humor and charm light up every interview. But beneath the surface, Jin has always been something more for Jimin, a quiet protector, a brother who understands when the rest of the world falls silent. And on that lonely night, Jin reminded everyone what true friendship looks like. According to insiders and fan witnesses who followed BTS activity on Weverse, Jin was the first and only member to post a birthday message for Jimin publicly that day. His message wasn't extravagant. It wasn't filled with fancy words or excessive emojis. Instead, it carried a tone of quiet comfort, a message written not for the cameras, but for the heart. Jimin, Jin wrote, "I know things might feel quieter this year, but remember, even in silence, you're never alone. Hyung's always here." Within minutes, the post began to spread like wildfire. Fans who had been anxiously waiting for any kind of acknowledgement of Jimin's birthday suddenly found themselves overwhelmed with emotion. Some even said they cried reading Jin's simple yet profound words. The sincerity of his message resonated across the ARMY community. "That's Jin," one fan wrote. "He doesn't say much, but when he does, every word heals." Behind the scenes, people close to the group revealed that Jimin had been going through a difficult time recently. His parents, who usually celebrate with him every year, were reportedly overseas for medical treatment. His closest friends were busy with their own schedules, and many of his former colleagues from the entertainment industry had drifted apart over the years. The cheerful, bright Jimin that fans knew seemed to have retreated into his own world, quiet, reflective, and perhaps lonely. Sources said Jimin spent most of his day inside the practice room, listening to old BTS songs while rehearsing alone. He wasn't filming, he wasn't recording, he was simply there, lost in his own thoughts. That was when his phone buzzed. A notification popped up on the screen, a message from Jin. Fans later found out that Jin didn't just write a post. He also sent Jimin a private message with a video clip attached. The video was reportedly recorded from Jin's military dorm, where he is still serving. In the short clip, Jin smiled gently and said, "Happy birthday, Jimin. I can't be there in person, but I wanted to remind you that someone out here is thinking about you. You're doing well, right? I hope you're eating properly. Don't get too caught up in sadness. You're stronger than you think." It was the kind of message only Jin could deliver. Warm, genuine, and filled with love that doesn't need grand gestures to be felt. Fans who read about it said it felt like a scene from a movie. One friend reaching out across distance and silence to comfort another. Later that evening, Jimin appeared briefly on Weverse Live. His tone was soft, his words careful. "I didn't plan to go live today," he said with a shy smile. "But I got a message that made me realize something important. Sometimes, even if the world feels empty, one person's kindness can make it full again." Though he didn't mention Jin's name directly, everyone knew who he was talking about. His eyes glistened slightly as he continued, "It's strange. I thought this year would just pass quietly. But someone reminded me that birthdays aren't about being celebrated by everyone. They're about remembering who's been by your side the whole time." The moment was intimate and raw. ARMY across the world flooded the chat with purple hearts and comments expressing their love and admiration for both Jin and Jimin. Some fans said they hadn't seen Jimin this emotional since BTS's final group concert before enlistment. "You could feel the loneliness in his voice," one viewer wrote, "but also the comfort that Jin's message gave him. It's like Jin reached into his heart and reminded him he's loved." The bond between Jin and Jimin has always been special, a balance of humor and sincerity, teasing and protection. They've shared countless moments together on stage and off-screen. Fans still remember how Jin would always feed Jimin first during meals, or how he'd tease him about his height just to make him laugh. But behind the jokes, Jin always carried a brotherly concern for him. When Jimin struggled with self-confidence during the Love Yourself era, Jin was one of the few who sat beside him quietly, offering support without judgment. When Jin became the only one to celebrate Jimin's 30th birthday, It wasn't a surprise, it was destiny. That night, after his short live ended, Jimin posted a photo on Weverse. It showed a small chocolate cake with a single candle lit on top, sitting next to a handwritten note. Fans zoomed in and recognized Jin's handwriting instantly. The note said, "Even if no one lights your candle, light it yourself, and I'll be there cheering from afar." The photo broke the internet. Within hours, hashtags like #JiminOurSerendipity, #JinForJimin, and #EternalHyung began trending globally. Fans began writing messages about friendship, gratitude, and emotional healing. One army from the Philippines wrote, "This is not just a birthday post. This is what real love looks like. Quiet but unwavering." Media outlets also picked up the story, calling it one of the most touching celebrity moments of the year. In a world where public gestures often overshadow genuine emotion, Jin's simple act reminds us that kindness can still be pure, wrote the Korea Herald. Meanwhile, Dispatch Korea described Jin's post as a love letter disguised as a birthday wish. Even Korean netizens, often known for their bluntness, filled online forums with praise. "Jin doesn't need cameras to be kind. He's just built differently," one user commented. Another said, "Jimin may have been alone, but he's lucky, because Jin remembers him even when the world forgets." By the next morning, Jimin's mood had visibly changed. Fans spotted him outside HYB's training building wearing a soft smile and holding a coffee cup. When a reporter asked if he had received Jin's message, Jimin simply nodded and said, "Hyung always keeps his promises." He didn't elaborate, but those 5 words were enough to make everyone emotional. Inside HYB, staff reportedly arranged a small surprise later that afternoon after hearing how quiet Jimin's birthday had been. But even as gifts poured in, everyone knew that nothing could compare to what Jin had done, because his gesture wasn't about celebration, it was about connection. As evening fell once more, fans began to post their own photos of small cakes, candles, and handwritten notes inspired by Jin's message. The global fanbase turned Jin's simple act into a movement. Light for Jimin. Across the world, ARMY lit candles and shared them online with the caption, "Even in silence, you're loved." In the days that followed, Jimin seemed more at peace. He posted a message to fans thanking them for their love, ending it with, "There's always someone who remembers, even when it feels like no one does." I hope you all have that kind of person too. It was subtle, yet deeply personal, another quiet nod to Jin. Entertainment reporters later confirmed that Jin had requested extra phone time from his military base just to send that message to Jimin. He reportedly told one of his colleagues, "I just don't want him to feel forgotten. He's been there for me so many times. This is the least I can do." The revelation added another layer of depth to the story, and fans couldn't help but admire the strength of their brotherhood. It wasn't about fame or spotlight. It was about genuine human connection. A S1 Army user beautifully put it. In a world full of noise, Jin chose silence, and in that silence, his love spoke louder than any crowd. The story of Jimin's quiet birthday and Jin's heartfelt gesture has since become one of the most shared and discussed moments in the fandom's recent history. It reminded fans, and perhaps even the idols themselves, of what truly matters: compassion, memory, and the courage to reach out when others don't. Days later, as Jin's post continued to circulate online, one fan summed it up perfectly. Jin didn't just celebrate Jimin's birthday, he saved it. And maybe that's what makes their bond so powerful. Not the grand celebrations or luxury gifts, but the moments of silence filled with understanding. Because at the end of the day, when the lights fade and the crowds go home, sometimes all it takes is one person, one voice, one message, to make the world feel whole again. Jimin blew out the single candle on his cake that night. He smiled softly and whispered something almost too quiet to hear. But those who watched the replay of his live swore they caught it. He said, "Thank you, Hyung." And somewhere miles away, perhaps in a quiet military dorm under the dim light of the moon, Jin smiled too, proud, relieved, and grateful that even in distance, their hearts had found a way to meet. Because for Jin and Jimin, friendship isn't about being surrounded by everyone, it's about being remembered by the one who never forgets.